All right, we are live, recording live, I should say, for a very important impromptu podcast. I think Kenzo and I were saying this is the fastest a podcast has ever come together in like 3 days. So it explains the brevity and the importance of the situation. So I'm here with an all-star crew of men's gymnastics experts. So I can't go in my Brady Bunch order. We have Kensley, we have Justin Spring, Brett McClure, Mike Burns, Mark Williams, myself. Everybody is here because we rapidly said on Twitter, if we had a roundtable discussion about all of the things that need to be talked about in men's gymnastics with the collegiate situation going on, would you be open to it? And everyone is open to it. So I thank everyone for their time. I know it's hard to shuffle all of our schedules around with babies and practices and work schedules and things like that. But yeah, I think my short little intro is that obviously it's near and dear to my heart, and all of us here are involved so much, but we're seeing things shake up at an unfortunate and fast rate with programs being dropped and really big headaches coming up. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's a clear path forward right now. So I want to try to have everybody on here to give you guys the platform to share your thoughts and share your opinions, where you guys agree, where you might disagree, and try to just get a thoughtful discussion around what we can do as a sport, as a community, to try and help these programs the best we can, and also kind of think about what can we do moving forward, obviously given coronavirus and everything else that's happening. So I'll turn the mic over to Kensley to kind of chat and then intro some of these topics, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, the sport of men's gymnastics is unfortunately declining very rapidly in our country. In 1981, we had 79 teams, and in the next season, we're going to have possibly as little as 12. And this is not just a problem for men's gymnastics, but many of the Olympic sports, including wrestling, fencing, and swimming and diving. And so what I want to throw out to each of you is, when did each of you feel like your sport was in danger?
I guess we can kind of start with Justin and work our way around.
The first CGA meeting I ever walked into as a 26-year-old head coach, I was like, this is it, huh? You know, that was back in 2009. So, you know, I said when I got the head coaching position in Illinois, if I get 8 years, I'll be lucky, right? And not normally a pessimist, but it was headed in that direction. We'd lost MIT and UMass and just some of these critical programs, and I just like, how do we stop this? I think we're gonna get into it, but there's a lot of constituents, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of people to please, and it's really hard to do that. So, right away.
Brett, what are your thoughts?
Very similar story to Justin. I started my coaching career after I retired in 2006, and I was at the Air Force Academy for 4 years with Kip Simons. And like Justin, you know, those first couple CGA meetings, it was a very real topic that has been under discussion for a very long time. And, you know, I told myself 5 years, you know, it's going to be 5 years before we lose all the programs. And that shifted my mindset in what I wanted to do as a college coach, you know, so I wanted to get out and to Stanford and work with the international guys as much as possible. 5 more years, maybe. Well, I want to help Cal, you know, and make sure that program is self-sustained and we don't lose any more programs. You know, I want to be part of the legacy that helps keep the programs around. So 4 years at Cal, trying to build a new business model. And again, probably 5 years away. You know, I saw I could make an impact on the international side of things with USA Gymnastics. I thought, you know, that'd be a good opportunity to help the gymnastics community as a whole, you know, and see what I could do. And now with COVID, it's obviously changed the landscape tremendously. And so now here we are.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I guess, Mike, you're the next one up here. And I guess the immediacy of the situation obviously is under a lot of heat right now. So what are your thoughts on everything as it currently lays?
Well, you know, Kensley's question was, when did you first fear this? You mentioned in 1981 there were 79 programs. That was when I first started coaching at the University of Iowa, 1981, and there was you know, it seemed when I went to my first CGA meeting, it was the NACGC back then, but when I went to my first meeting, it was a big room, like a ballroom full of people, and now we're in a little bit of a closet of a room for our CGA meetings because we don't have that many. But there's a lot of passion in this group. I think that's the thing that drives it. You know, the thing that kept me in the sport of gymnastics. I started gymnastics in 10th grade. I was a walk-on at Penn State. I should have got cut. something about this sport just gets in your blood and you can't help but love it. And it's the people. Honestly, it's the people. You know, the skills we do. It's hard on the body. It's a frustrating sport, right? Your level of perfection is so small that you have to be on to be able to be good, right? But the people are what drives this thing, and I think that's the thing that has kept this sport alive as long as it has. I talked to Peter Corman recently, and he was, you know, back in the late 90s, they got the Olympic sports exception legislation passed. And he thought back then, you know, they'll be lucky to survive another, you know, 10 years or something like that. So kind of like what Brett's saying, another 5 years. And Brett, I like the fact that you keep saying another 5 years. I want you to keep saying that every single year that you're alive, you know, and maybe we can just keep going another 5 years. Now, obviously our situation's different. So I kind of have always existed looking over my shoulder. When am I going to get that call, right? And I dodged the bullet for 40 years. So I feel like that was a pretty good track record. So now I must have been standing still too long, and the bullet just hit me right in the butt, right? So here we are dealing with the situation, and you know, I'm sure we'll talk more about it as you mentioned, Dave. But you know, it's tough to be in that situation. I got to tell you, you know. But what it does is it kind of forces you to dig into your personal life philosophy about how you want to do things, and that's kind of where I am right now, you know. And I just have this thing in my DNA that won't let me just quit, right? So I won't do that. Anyway, that's where I'm at.
Yep. Mark?
Yeah, I got into college coaching in 1988, and we had started to hear the rumblings at that point for sure. And I think in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going to go to Oklahoma, I'll get my master's degree, and 5 years later, I'll be off doing something else. It was kind of the same thing as Brett was talking about, that, you know, you just hope to get in there, have your opportunity, and then if things fall apart, you're going to have to look at the next opportunity. But I think it got to be a real concern when University of Oregon and Arizona State and UCLA dropped their programs in that period after 1988, when they'd won national championships, and it just didn't seem to matter. UCLA was one of the best programs historically, having won national championships, having Olympians, and you know, that's when it got scary. I think that people weren't recognizing what the product was bringing, not only to our Olympic movement, but you know, those opportunities in gymnastics are so valuable, and we've hung in there. I'm hoping that we can continue like another 5 years.
Brett, I want to throw the next question to you, specifically about your experience at Cal, and talk about the very real reality of almost losing the program there and being able to save it through fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, that's attributed to phenomenal alumni base. I mean, they really stepped up to the plate and raised the funds needed to have the opportunity to continue as a program. And having the athletic director, Sandy Barber, at the time, be open to that opportunity to look at a self-sustained model. Originally, it was a pledge effort that was to give Cal 4 more years or 5 more years. And my mentality when I went to Cal was to replace each year, right, with enough fundraising to continue on another year and hopefully another 5 years. So I created somewhat of a business model that is nothing new to a lot of programs, such as like University of Washington, Arizona, trying to raise revenue in addition to the development side of things and fundraising with your alumni and your local community. Building the Cal Benefit Cup was a big first step for me as a new head coach and somebody who has never raised money before, to create a product that people were willing to pay for and enjoy. And I felt more comfortable as a coach providing a service, right, for their donations. And 100% of the proceeds went back to the program. Eventually, it would offset the entire operating budget. And then we take a look at another bucket. You know, how can we offset a coaching salary? You know, just little things at a time, and try to create a self-sustained model to where now It's been for 4 or 5 years beyond what it was expected to do, and it looks like it's going to continue in that direction. And I think it's a model that is doable, but every university is different.
Did your AD come to you specifically and tell you the reason why they were going to have to cut the program?
I wasn't there during that time when they decided to cut. I believe it was 5 programs. And it was, I believe, related to the new football stadium renovation project, which put them in the hole for many years to come. And they were looking at cutting roughly $20 million right away through 5 sports. And even that, I don't think would have helped with the stadium project in the long run, because it was a very long-term loan deal. I'm not sure exactly the details behind it, but the backlash from the alumni community from all 5 sports was so significant. They were able to raise most of the money back, where rugby, for example, raised enough money for both the women's gymnastics team and the rugby team. Baseball took on another team with themselves. Men's gymnastics was actually unable to meet the target goal. I believe it was somewhere $2.4 million, and they were able to get 1.8 in pledges, and they didn't want to leave them out to dry. And so they said, okay, that'll do it. Instead of being forever, you've got 8 years until the money runs out. And so, I don't know if it was the alumni that really pushed it, but I'm assuming that the donors had a large impact on the sustainability of their programs. And they listen to donors.
So that is good news, that there has been a program that has been saved. The voice of the community does matter, and funds in this case were able to be raised. So Mike, I want to come to you and ask you, has your AD, 1, given you any reason as to why specifically they're cutting the program? And 2, were you given the opportunity to fundraise before they decided to make this decision?
The reason that our AD gave for the cutting of the 4 sports, so it's us, men's tennis, men's indoor and outdoor track, and it's going to impact about 58 student athletes. The reason was twofold. Obviously, the financial implications based on football not being played because of COVID. Our AD and our CFO had presented to the Board of Regents back in May, I think, kind of a 3-case scenario situation, where one was the best case scenario where you play football, but maybe only 20% of the stands were full. The second one was you play football, but you don't have any fans. And then the third one is you don't play football at all with no fans. And that's like the apocalypse, right? So anyway, we run into the apocalypse, which is a $75 million shortfall in revenue. And, you don't have ticket sales, you don't have scholarship seating, you don't have Big Ten network TV revenue, ESPN, the whole thing, right? So that's a pretty big nut to crack, $75 million. But what isn't mentioned is the offsetting expenses that aren't being, the money's not being spent because you're not competing. So there's an offset in there, but 75 million is the number that you keep hanging your hat on. And then last week, the Big Ten announced we're going to go back to playing football probably next month sometime. A lot of hoops to jump through still. But if that happens, then that $75 million worst case scenario will probably go to the $35 million revenue deficit for the Goldilocks, just the in-between worst case scenario and best case scenario. So that changes things. It changes the equation. So I think based on that, and that happened after the announcement to drop the programs came, I think if I'm one of the Board of Regents, members of the Regents, I have to kind of maybe ask a few questions about how does that impact the financial thing. So that was one part, the financial part. The second part was Title IX. Apparently our student body population at Minnesota has risen to 54% female and 46% male, where about maybe 2012 it was like 51-49, so it was a lot closer to 50-50. So that's had an impact, and based on the number of student athletes we have, we're out of compliance. So in order to get into compliance, we're going to cut men's opportunities, which is the typical unintended consequence of Title IX, right? Title IX is a great piece of legislation. It's been around for a lot of years, and it's done a lot of great things. So those are the two main issues. We had a Zoom call on the 10th of September, Thursday. I got text message from our HR person about 45 minutes before the meeting, and we were told in the meeting they're dropping these 4 programs at the end of this competition season. And somebody did ask, well, can we fundraise? No, you won't be able to fundraise enough, because in order to endow all the programs, you're going to have to raise like $60 million. So you throw a big number out like that, everybody goes, oh, can't raise that. So it sort of takes the wind out of the sails, right? And then so that was at 2:00. At 2:15, we had a second Zoom call with all the student athletes of the impacted programs and the coaches. And then at 3:00, we had an all staff meeting announcing that, plus the pay cut issues that were going to be presented the next day at the Board of Regents meeting. So anyway, that's kind of how it was. So the fundraising aspect, you got to raise a lot of money if you want to endow a program. For our program, which costs on an annual basis about $750,000, we'd have to fundraise or get an endowment fund of close to $15 million, maybe a little bit more than $15 million to be able to cover that cost every year in perpetuity. So that's a big nut to crack. And I think when numbers like that are thrown out, especially in our sport, we're kind of the kings of doing things on a small budget, right? We've been doing it for decades, and that's how we operate. We never throw anything out. Okay. Oh, you got a broken vaulting board? Let's take it apart and turn it into something else in the gym, right? That's what you do. And so anyway, getting back to your question, were we given the opportunity to fundraise? No, not really. I mean, yes, but no, right?
Okay. Well, and as we've seen with William and Mary, and what we'll talk about later, is endowment is not the cure-all, because William and Mary was mostly endowed, and they were still cut, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So this question goes back to the round.
Can I say something? But I think in the Stanford case, when they dropped 11 sports back in July, we were all like, "Phew!" It wasn't gymnastics, right? And that was a big thing, and one of the main reasons was they did have a pretty healthy endowment fund. So I think that was it does help. It certainly doesn't hurt.
It absolutely doesn't, but it isn't a cure-all. So we can talk more about endowments in a little bit. But what I want to throw out to the round table is open-ended scoring a reason for the decline in men's gymnastics? Is this a myth or is this reality? So Justin, I'll throw this one to you.
All right. I don't think anyone has any idea, right? You just can't say we went to open-ended, now all these programs are dropping off. I think that doing just some anecdotal evidence, you can hear people are frustrated with the ability to follow the current format. I've always been a proponent of trying, simpler or simplify. And so when as far as to propose like a match play format that makes it about 1 point against the other, allows you to keep the FIG scoring system, so we still kind of align with the Olympic movement. And I don't know, because I think that social significance is valued here. When you're looking at a variety of sports that you can cut with similar budgets and similar Title IX implications, who do we not want to get rid of? And it comes down to, I think, that social significance and financial dollars and Title IX things. So you've got got 3 major things there. And so, if you're packing stands and you've got, this sport's become a little bit more prominently, shown on television. Big Ten Network starts really showing a lot more meets because this is a product that sells and is doing well. I thought that would be a way. So I don't know. I guess after saying all that, yeah, maybe it's hurt the sport a little bit. But I mean, again, if you've been looking over the last 30, 40 years, well before we went to the open-ended score, we were losing programs all the time. So I don't think I don't think it's helped, but I don't think that's a root cause.
Brett, what about you?
I think it's a myth. I think it's actually helped our programs, and I'm not saying that as a high performance director. I'm saying that as a college coach, and that was something of a very high priority in my personal beliefs, coming from the Olympic movement and wanting to share that experience with as many student athletes as possible. Whether it was competing for USA or other countries, for example, had a lot of opportunities at Cal to do that with some international students. And I do think it's something that has brought more significance to our programs as a whole and not contributed to the decline. Like Justin said, he hit the nail on the head. We were losing programs in the 10-0 system. Open-ended code from the FIG standpoint is a whole nother conversation, right? Was that the right decision from our sport? But I think it's the right decision for us as a country to align, with that trajectory. to help support the efforts, not only to get a college scholarship and get your education, but also be able to compete at the World Championships and the Olympic Games, and to have all of those opportunities be available is really important.
Mike, what do you think?
I'm a big fan of cause and effect relationships, and I don't think there's a cause and effect necessarily there. I think there's some things on the outskirts. Like, for instance, when you try to re-engage your alumni from maybe past years, from the 60s and 70s, and there's a lot of animosity there because, like, I don't even understand what's going on, and there's like the music's too loud and things are different, right? And that's called evolution. And I think we all have to find a way to evolve with the times, right? And I went to an NBA game once when I lived in Michigan, and it was the last game of the season. I was like shocked at how much stuff was going on. It's like, oh, there's a basketball game too, right? And that's just people's attention span, right? In the days we live now, you got to keep people looking, right? And we're always trying to do things from a marketing standpoint to attract people besides just the gymnastics, right? You hope that gymnastics is enough to draw people in. But when they're there, especially in the way we run our meets, the scoring is a little confusing. People don't get it. They want to, what fans want to do, they want to be able to get engaged in the action, right? When you're at a football game or a basketball game and there's a bad call, what do? You scream and boo and whistle at the officials. I mean, they're like the perfect people to hate, right? And I remember when I was competing at Penn State back when we had the 10-0 and the whole thing, if there was a bad score, there was 5,000 people, they're booing the judges. And I'm going, oh my gosh. And that's, as a fan, you want to do that. That's what the goal of being a fan is. I think you want to second guess the officials. And in gymnastics, if people understand the sport, they want to go, that was about a 9-6, and then the score comes up 9-6-5. It's like, yeah, I know the sport, right? You feel justified in your being a fan. And now it's challenging, right? You don't know. That was a good routine. Got nothing. I got nothing. So unless you really are able to judge alongside while the action's going on, which most people in the stands can't do and don't want to do because it is confusing. Even the judges struggle with it, right? And
I think in some way I agree to some extent, but I walked onto University of Michigan campus having never set foot at a gymnastics meet, and the guys on the team sat down with me and said, hey, we want you to be involved. We want you to learn. And over the course of the season, I went from never having stepped foot on a gymnastics floor to running the floor at NCAA championships that we hosted in 2014. And now, covering world championships and being able to have a really good idea about what good scores are and what the score should be and difficulty scores. So I don't think it's quite as impossible as
no,
people.
I agree, Kensley, but also you are a unique individual. You're not normal. You're way above the average when it comes to normalcy. So I think most people don't want to put that much effort into it. They just want to sit and enjoy it, right? So I get that. You are a totally engaged person in the sport of gymnastics, and I love that about you. But not everybody wants to do that, and I think if there's a simplicity like Justin mentioned, I think that's an important part of it. So how can we create a better product? I always think the product at the championships is a great thing, and then I talk to people in the stands and say, oh yeah, but it was a great product. Yeah, actually it wasn't. I hear people say it's not a great product because I don't get it. There's so much going on. It's like sensory overload, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just the nature of our sport. It's like that in any big meet. You're going to have 6 events going at once, and you better figure out how to follow it.
Well, Mark, what do you think about the open-ended scoring and its effect on the decline of men's gymnastics? Do you think it's a myth, or do you think it's reality?
I think it's a myth. I agree with Brett that it's not about the open-ended code. We had 85% of the drop programs happen even before the open-ended code came into existence. I mean, I competed under the 10-0, I coached under the 10-0, and then I had to make the adjustment to the open-ended code because that's what the FIG determined to be our new scoring system. I'm not a proponent about the open-ended code. I'm a proponent of doing what the FIG is doing internationally for gymnastics. And I think as an NCAA group, our best ability to follow the sport is to allow our athletes to come up, get educations, try to compete at the highest levels, have opportunities to go on and maybe represent the country internationally. And we saw when we tried to modify codes in the past that did not follow the FIG, that those athletes at the NCAA could not keep up. It was too difficult to try to win NCAA championships with rules that were modified, and then 2 months later have to change those routines to try to qualify for the Olympic Games. So I absolutely do not see the open-ended code as a cause of programs being dropped.
As far as going back and forth between the elite system and the NCAA system, it is important for those listening, if you don't know, that the NCAA is a huge funnel into our elite program. Most of our Olympians and world team members have gone through the NCAA program or had some part in it. And one of the things I've wondered about as being a contributing factor is the NCAA season, how it's set up, how it ends in maybe early to mid-April. And it doesn't give the gymnasts a lot of time to build in new skills to be competitive with Russia, China, and Japan. And so I wondered if perhaps a shifting of the NCAA season into being maybe a summer sport that leads into a build-up towards Worlds, or maybe shortening the season, if this could have an effect on the overall international representation for Team USA that could then therefore maybe increase the fan base at the NCAA level.
Well, I'd jump in and say, I think it's worked fine for the guys I've trained for international competitions. Jake Dalton had an opportunity to compete 3 years as an NCAA athlete, and during that time, he competed on just about every international event there is. And then when he made the Olympic Games, he made a choice about not staying NCAA eligible so that he could go on an Olympic tour and make enough money to then pay his own way to finish out his education. So I was fine with that. It made total sense, but he was able to comfortably combine both the NCAA scheduling and what he had to do as an international athlete representing the U.S.
Do you think that because you've had so many international elites in your program, do you feel that your program has benefited when you have people like Yul come home with a world medal, or you have Jake come home as an Olympian, or John? Do you see a boost in your fan base in tandem with international success?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. We have some notoriety from what we've done internationally. They get to be on television at some of the bigger events. But I think that's only part of it. I think when I took over as a head coach, we had an average attendance number of about 350 spectators. Over the course of 10 years, we've gotten it well above 1,000 for each of our home meets. And part of the reason that's gone up is because of my engagement with the community. We work with an elementary school that we do mentoring, and they come in for a meet at least once every season. I've got a great relationship with the president of the university, my athletic director. I'm promoting education here. So there's a lot of factors into why we've been successful at the University of Oklahoma. And it's not just about guys making international events, but it certainly is one of the things I try to tell guys is that you can get your education, you can compete for national championships, and you can go up to the highest level of the sport, because we've done that repeatedly over the last 20 years.
Brett, what do you think? Do you think an increase in international success would beef the support both monetarily and fan base wise in NCAA gymnastics?
There's no doubt in my mind. If you have an Olympic gold medal, the trickle down effect with the popularity of the sport as a whole, it just magnifies everything, right? You're more accessible. You're in commercials. Your name is Justin Spring, and you go out there, and everybody gets excited to throw a parade when he comes into town because he's got an Olympic medal. It's a big deal, and it can have a very positive effect.
So do either of the three of you, either Brett, Justin, or Mike, see that potentially changing the NCAA season to allow for more time for skill development could have a potential impact overall?
I was going to come out. Oh, want to take a mic?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to come at this at a completely different level. Like I certainly believe there's an opportunity to enhance the visibility of your program through the international area. And again, I know I'm crazy in my thoughts in a lot of ways, but I also feel like I'm here at the University of Illinois, and you watch a football team compete. Yes, you have your stars within your team, but you want to see your team beat the other team. I think that we've made a lot of adjustments and accommodations for the 5% in our field, which is the guys that are training for that next level and kind of I don't want to say abandoned, but like there's just that our difficulty is so challenging. We leave a lot of guys behind. The scoring difference between my first guy up and my last guy up could be 2 points sometimes, depending on the event, if we're strong or weak on that event. And so, again, going back to kind of the simplified just kind of philosophy, I think that, there was times where I was also pushing that we've got to start making, if you look at, again, like volleyball went to rally scoring, which was just crazy. Actually, the coaches' vote was like 80% against it. And their governing body said, nope, we're doing it. Their coaches association, we're doing it because this is what TV needs. This is what our fans need. And everyone was like, our fans can't follow the fact that you only score after you serve. That's stupid. But they struggled with that. And then they went to this rally point scoring. Volleyball's taken off because of the television coverage. And so you talk about television coverage, gold medal, parade, advertisements being the trickle-down effect. I think that also comes from being able to follow and understand game success and why my team's better than your team. Again, like Kensley, it took you the course of a year to build that engagement. I could bring anyone who's never watched or heard of even a basketball game, and they can jump right in and be like, oh, I get this. I don't get the nuances, but I get it. And I can cheer at the right times, and I understand why everyone's pissed right now or everyone's really excited because the game's on the line. That's the worst part about it. The only time I've ever seen where everyone knew the game was on the line was the match play meet I ran with Mike Burns when we had the win-out situation. Yeah, it ran long, and there were some problems with it, but our fans were cheering one more point. They knew this was the moment we were going to win. I think you're missing that excitement in the college atmosphere because that's what college sports is about, my team beating your team. And yeah, he scored that many points, and he was awesome that day. But to me, it's getting behind your school colors, supporting your team.
So let's go ahead.
Obviously, that's not the answer to your question, but I kind of want a different way.
As a follow-up to that, if there was to be a change in NCAA scoring and format, it's not quite so easy as there being a CGA vote, right? It has to go to the NCAA and they have to approve. Can you talk about the length of what that would look like if that's just the way the NCAA decided to go?
Burns could probably talk, or Mark could probably talk. They've been on these committees, the rules committee, but it's not easy. We missed our window 10 years ago before all the bureaucracy got really thick and heavy, right? Like now we've tried to make some changes and they've come back and said, no, you can't. It's only on 2-year cycles. We need statistical research. And like now it's really, really hard to make change like that.
Yeah, I've been part of the rules committee at 3 different quads. So this will be my 12th year, I guess, as a rules committee member. And there's a lot of discussion that goes into any big change. The coaches have to sort of bring it to the committee. The committee then has to discuss it, has to go to an oversight committee. Any change is going to take at minimum 2 years. And sometimes in that 2 years, circumstances change and then it just gets abandoned. So yeah, it's difficult. The NCAA doesn't always understand the sport and they don't understand why it's important to us. And they're always looking at trying to keep it equal with all the other sports that they support. So if it's not similar to, the basketball team, what they're getting or doing, they're going to look at it as, well, we can't do that if we're not doing it for all the other teams.
And Mark, isn't the NCAA is not who makes these committees, right? There's maybe a representative there, but it's usually there's coaches, but then there's administrators picked and pulled from schools that have representation within that sport. So like an associate athletic director might be sitting on it, or Marks, or someone from Iowa or William and Mary.
Yeah, and the administrators are there to kind of balance the vote, and a lot of times the administrators will point out things that coaches hadn't thought about or vice versa. And even the administrators may not understand the sport and what we do during competitions all that well. And a lot of times they rely on us for that information. But once it goes from the committee, it has to go to a whole nother part of the NCAA that looks at it as, is this fair for all sports in the NCAA? And that's a lot of times where we get caught up. where we have a different sport than a lot of things that go on.
So, Kensley, I wanted to kind of talk about your change in the schedule, because I've always been the proponent of starting the season earlier, because as a winter sport, we start in January. Our competition season's in January. Every other winter sport starts sometime in either late September, mid-October, or late October. So you got all these winter sports that are kind of overlapping with the fall sports. And then as the fall sports are over, the winter sports are sort of getting into the beef of their season, right? And then gymnastics is nowhere to be found. And finally, gymnastics shows up after Christmas time, right? With the Windy City meet or whatever. And then as we go through, all the winter sports start to be done around, from late February into March, and basketball now into April. And one of the reasons we had our NCAA championship in the third week in April is because of conflicts with venues, with the March Madness and not knowing where all the regional sites might be prior to the Final Four. There's always issues with venues. So that was one of the things, shifted a little bit to avoid those conflicts. But what happens is now the spring sports start up in late February or early March. So baseball and softball is going crazy. ESPN has this huge contract, so they're on TV all the time. It's like a really popular sport, right? So all of a sudden we kind of get caught off at the beginning of the season by waiting too long. And then as we're getting into the beef of our season, all the spring sports start, and we kind of get overshadowed by them. So it's in my opinion, I've always wanted to shift it back earlier, start maybe in December. And we all have our inter-squad meets in December, so turn those into regular meets. It's a rough time of the year, but you're going to have to get started then anyway. Have a couple of meets before December. You can go through the Christmas break, and Illinois beat Oklahoma on that December 9th meet, and they're ranked number 1 for the next month, right before the Windy City comes up. And there's something you can sell over that time period where we're kind of barren in terms of news in that December to January time when we're waiting to get going. So that's kind of been my thought for a long time.
Thank you for all of your thoughts on that. And one of the questions that was asked most often over Twitter during this past week was, how much does it actually cost to run one of these NCAA programs? So if you're at liberty to share, can you let us know how much it cost?
Mike said it already, right? 700 to $1 million or less. I mean, Cal probably runs 500. Depends on if you have scholarships too. Even less than that, Brett.
Yeah, and it varies from year to year. It depends on your travel schedule, your roster size, things of that nature. But when I was the head coach, I would shoot for $200,000 a year, and that was everything minus the indirect costs, right? So it's coaches' salaries, operating budget, and things like that. So if you travel a little bit more, it's going to be pushing closer to 300,000. But I don't know if we were able to get lower than 200.
Okay.
Mark alluded to this time and time again, though, and that sounds great, but of course, of the last 10 years, I've been almost stressed to spend more money because in the Power 5 conference, there's a certain way that we're kind of expected to do things, right? And so in ways that I was like, we don't need to do that. I've had to do it, and that from trying to bring my whole team to a meet in Puerto Rico and we're just going to sleep 3 to a room, and one would have to be on the pull-out couch. I wasn't allowed because, you want to have a parent group come back and be like, why was my kid on the couch? His back hurts him now or whatever. And so there's some of the Mike, I know, and Mike's laughing, but these are this serious. I mean, athletic departments are under an unbelievable scrutiny and stress and pressure from a lot of different bases.
There's a lot of things that are not part of the coach's accountability too, like the scholarships, the medical costs. Those are all part of your overall budget, but we're given, these are things you can actually control. So currently with the environment, with the pandemic, my athletic department has asked me to cut about 30% of our budget for this year. So we're going to have to make do with less this year because there's less going around to all the sports.
Okay. One of the one other myth or reality I wanted to throw out was Title IX. You know, Mike, we heard from you that was one of the reasons given was Title IX for one of the reasons that you were cut, and this has been really heavily debated. But I want to hear from the other three. Do you think Title IX has had a trickle down effect? Is that a myth or is it reality?
I think the other prong that you look at is spending, right? So it's not just representation, it's spending, and so I think that's what's been exacerbated lately is the sports that make money are having to pay a lot of money to make those sports happen because they're the football and basketball programs, and so if you're going to pay a basketball coach millions of dollars, you've got to offset that payment and allocation dollars to a female sport. And so, that I think that's become a bigger issue too now with the average salary going up to the tens of millions for football coaches and, I don't know how many dozens of millions for basketball coaches, but then they're big staffs and things like that. And so money's being spent on the sports that generate revenue through ticket sales and television contracts. But that's the other issue, so Title IX's kind of forced a prioritization of allocated funds as well.
Back in the 90s, I think the NCAA had a restricted earnings coaches. Okay, so you could have an additional coach, but you had to restrict his earnings, right? So that was kind of a mandated kind of legislative salary cap, if you will. Well, that went over really bad, and the restricted earnings coaches did a class action suit that cost the NCAA about $10 million because they had to reimburse them all for missed funds. So there's a lot of talk out there about, hey, there should be a limit on what a basketball coach or a football coach should make. And I'm not. I mean, I understand that there's issues with that, but I don't agree with that. That's kind of like athletic socialism or something. This is a free market, right? And if a free market dictates that Nick Saban's going to make $8 million, and the people in Alabama love Nick Saban, and he's brought them to the championship level many, many times, and disappointed his fans on several occasions as well, right? But the market dictates it. And does that impact the rest of the athletic department? I'd say negatively, yes, and positively, definitely yes, So, I mean, these guys are celebrities. They've gotten to celebrity status. And, I'm not one who's going to say, yeah, you should restrict their earnings. They're making too much money. They shouldn't make more than the president of the university. But, usually the highest paid public employee in every state is the football coach from the state university, right? And I have having trouble with that because I'm a firm believer in the free market that we live in, right?
The whole market's not free, Mike. This is where the Alston case comes in, right? They just won, so now there's more, and this has added pressure to the whole system here. I know every one of our athletic directors is looking what's coming down the pipeline, name, image, and likeness. In the Alston case, basically the full-blown pay for play, because facilities are free market, coaches' salaries are free market. Everything is in this entire competitive world except for what you pay your players. You're capping it at their scholarship. There was a cost of attendance that was added in a few years ago, but then that's it. And so the court said that's not right, and it's the whole thing's about to get blown off. And the NCAA is currently dictating what is going to be allowed to be given that's educationally based for these guys. But that could be promising, like if you come play here, we'll pay for your master's and PhD program at any Ivy League school of your choice. You do that for 10 players, that's millions and millions of dollars more. Not to mention every football player is going to get state-of-the-art laptops, state-of-the-art tutors from rocket science. Like there's no limit to the spending now in this regard. So that's just added pressure on the athletic directors to determine where they're going to be placing funds in this pro sports model, as Mike likes it. I mean, it's a pro model. It's a pro model, right?
Well, I think one of the main problems with college athletics is the fact that the NFL has the best farm system known to man, and it doesn't cost them a dime. I got a problem with that.
That's what we are for the Olympic. I mean, you could argue that's what we are. Like a handful of JUCO kids that make it, but they predominantly come from the NCAA system. We're the same way. I mean, our national team is 80-90% former or present NCAA team members.
So USAG should start paying our athletes. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying it's been real convenient. As we talk about Plan B, college football ain't going anywhere. NFL's loving life, but for USA Gymnastics, I know that's one of the questions. It's if this happens overnight, because we've lost 3 programs, that turns into all 12 going away next year. So I don't know, like, what's going to happen.
Mike, you bring up a great transition point. And so this question goes to Brett and Justin. So what is USAG and the USOPC's role in helping save men's gymnastics?
It's a great question. I see USA Gymnastics as kind of the overarching overall gymnastics community organization, and it's my job as a member of that organization to be involved on every level on the men's side of things, and that includes college gymnastics. And what can we do to support them? Anything that hasn't already been talked about in the past. We would like to help run the NCAA championships and partner with maybe the women's NCAA championships. Maybe we can look at combining with the JO Nationals and bring in a large fan base and community to make it a bigger event for television to market across the country or across the world, and for the local community to take some more economic stimulus from the amount of people that come in. It's just coming up with innovative ways to help support the entire system.
That was one of the questions that was thrown out to me this week is it possible to put NCAA meets in the same location as a large meet, say like the H&I Invitational? I know it's been canceled this year, or perhaps the Blackjack meet, something when you put the NCAA competitions at the same location where there are young gymnasts who would be willing to pay to go to these meets. Is that a possibility?
So we started doing that a long time ago. Mike was one of the pioneers with the Iceberg Invitational, right? And just so I think every program is doing maybe one of those where you have an invitational and you run it in conjunction with a dual meet. Problem is when you get into conference and NCAA championships is they own the rights. They want complete and total control over that because it's our championships. We fund the judges, we fund the signage, and where the TV contract is what we've negotiated, and so that's where it gets a little tricky. But I think that they're starting to budge a little bit. Mike and Mark could probably speak to this, but I think the NCAA has opened their ears a little bit to maybe joining forces for the championships, right?
For the NCAA men's and women's championships?
Nah, not the women's.
Oh, okay. But getting back to the combination of a junior meet in conjunction with a collegiate dual meet, for instance, we have been doing it for a while. The Iceberg meet, the John Roethlisberger Iceberg meet's been going on in Minnesota for probably 22 years now. And we started the Sky Yuma Invitational. We've had the MIGS program Team Open Cup there as well. So at any one time, we've had upwards of 3 of our home meets associated with junior meets. And they're always our best crowds. And we've figured out a way, to working through compliance, letting the kids in for free. They can check their name off on the roster of all the kids in the meet, and they get in, they watch. The parents have to pay, and we have a huge crowd. It's really exciting, and I think that's what you got to do. You got to be creative. Mark's done great things down there with his association with Cleveland Elementary School, and every time I've been down there and they've been there, it's been a rowdy crowd. Man, those little kids are nuts, right? They love you guys, Mark. They even like Mark Williams. It's hard to believe, right? They love him.
So rude.
You got fired, Mike. Jeez.
The thing is, you got to get out in the community, like Mark said, and you gotta beat the bushes.
Yeah, I know that Stanford has their meet and Cal has their meet, and I know that there are usually like 1 or 2 individual meets, but I wondered if making that a more regular occurrence would boost crowds, fan base, and from what I'm hearing is, well, it does help in this one scenario, but it's not really making a dent with our ADs as far as helping us keep the programs. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, I think the climate has changed. This pitch has been discussed in the past, and there have been times, and I was a part of the group, with the CGA, the USA Gymnastics. I want to co-host, the national championships, and the NCAA is like, no, hold on. We don't want that. We don't want that type of support. If you're going to take it on, then why do we even exist, for example? And then the College Gymnastics Association, myself included, is like, wait, hold on, USA Gymnastics, go away. This is our event. And honestly, we feel like we run our national championships better than any other event, right? It's one of the premier events. John Roethlisberger has said it many times. The NCAA championships was maybe more meaningful to him than competing at the Olympic Games. That's the type of atmosphere we fostered, right? And so now we're looking at, well, what can USA Gymnastics do? It's help support any way we can, in collaboration of. And if right now in this climate with COVID, everybody's trying to survive in every sport, every university, how can we share and use cost-cutting measures, right? Can we provide a venue and then the host receives some of the revenue and the NCAA can receive some of the revenue and et cetera, and spread it out just so we are all able to exist.
I think one of the issues, Brett, is the NCAA is not the most nimble organization out there, right? And everything has to kind of fit in some sort of a similar fashion as the NCAA basketball tournament, because that thing is a moneymaker. It's like proven to be the right format, right? But not every sport's like basketball, especially us with the numbers we have. And so I think it's important that the people that are involved in the sport, us, as Dave called us, the experts, right? Maybe I'd challenge that, but I'd like to think at times maybe we have some expert opinions. And, they need to listen to us because we're the ones in the trenches doing it every day and, being engaged at that level. And, we've been really lucky at the NCAA level with John Bugner, who's our NCAA championship liaison. He's been very willing to listen and very willing to be open-minded to certain things, but he also knows that he has to work within the confines of the NCAA, and he knows what might pass and what might not pass and where to put your effort. So I think it's important that the voices be heard and adjustments be made as needed. I'm really excited about USAG's involvement right now, Brett, and you and Jason and Lily and Stephanie at the office. I think there's been a huge push in a really positive way, and I'm excited about that.
And Brett, regarding USAG's role in helping save the sport, because we are kind of in this last hour with potentially 12 programs left next year, what is the backup plan should the NCAA go under? Because right now Stanford's not able to train on site, Ohio State's not able to train on site. Some of our national team athletes are training in New Jersey. Some are training down with Tom at Cyprus. So what is the plan if this goes under? How do we keep the Olympic team alive?
Well, we have to fight for our facilities. We have to fight for our coaches. Those two are, the number one priority. Place to train, someone to train them, and then opportunity to compete. And if that's in the NCAA model right now, great. Let's keep it going. 5 more years, right? Let's keep going 5 more years. If it's not, then we have to create something else that continues to offer the same opportunities to get a college education, to train in the sport that you love, and to be coached by the best coaches in the country, if not the world, right? And so we have to look at a brand new business model in order for that to be sustainable, and to make sure that these guys have an opportunity. Because I, like Mike, won't give up. Just because NCAA gymnastics doesn't exist, hopefully that never happens, doesn't mean that they can't do gymnastics in college, and doesn't mean they can't pursue world and Olympic games during that process. There are ways. We have to be innovative. We may have to, buckle up and take a hit financially as a community in order to get our feet back on the ground. We may suffer on the international competitive standards, a little dip in performance before we can come back up. There are a lot of things, and nobody has a crystal ball, can predict the future. But, we are going to come together. I mean, we're a strong community. We always have been. We've been fighting for a long time, and there's no reason to stop, even if the NCAA drops men's gymnastics.
Is there any talk about potentially raising coaches' salaries at the USOPTC? Because the salaries that USAG is able to match it's nowhere near as competitive as what the NCAA coaches are able to make at this point. And if we want this community to stick together, this is a lot of if scenarios, what are the talks with Lily going to look like, where you say, hey, if we want the best of the best, we have to raise how much we're paying our men's gymnasts. We have to raise how much we're paying the coaches there.
Yes. I agree with you 1,000%. I'm a huge advocate for paying our coaches and our athletes as much as we possibly can to support the efforts. I mean, if you look at our senior national team, most of the guys are having to pay rent, and now that they aren't covered by training expenses at the university, they're potentially paying tuition, to train at Tom Meadows Gym in Cyprus or whatever other club gym might be available. Some more expenses incurred, and especially with these club programs too. I just saw the list of the recent club programs that went out of business. I mean, it's so disheartening to see hundreds and hundreds across the country just going out of business. And our best coaches, how do we support them? Yeah, I would love to pay them what they're worth, and we will continue to fight that fight. The financial stability for USA Gymnastics, I think, is pretty public information, right? I think we're still bankrupt and trying to find our way out of that. We don't have sponsorship. We've had to be innovative in trying to get more training scholarships available for our national team members to help subsidize, what they had with sponsorship money in the previous quad. And we're going to continue to try to be as innovative as possible to help financially support, our athletes and coaches. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sponsorships,
but
I think that's the big one, right? When you lose these pods of training programs, if the NCAA system goes under, you've got the opportunity to funnel what would be maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into a collegiate program. Can you take a hold of that and have a Gym Act program at the local club and support those elite athletes through a sponsorship system? I mean, because then the NCAA rules are off, right? Then, forget name, image, likeness. It's like you can benefit all you want, and continue to train in our own newly created model and get these, direct sponsorships from maybe local. Problem is that a lot of those come in because of the alignment with the university. And so that's where I think it's going to be a critical mission moving forward once USAG gets out of bankruptcy and, coming off hopefully another, good Olympic year can get some sponsors and kind of channel that money to direct help to athletes. I think that's what sponsors want to do anyway, right? No one likes giving to the big pool, and like we supported that organization, but where did it go? Versus like we put out 5 guys at the mini satellite training center in Champaign or Chicago or wherever. And there are guys, we support them. And so, I just feel like that's a logical model moving forward. It's just tough right now because, I think you need it at a small capacity, but we're going to need it bigger in just the position USA Gymnastics is in right now.
Yeah, and Justin, that's that.
I think it's also a bigger issue where it's not just USA Gymnastics, but it's our Olympic Committee. And we're talking about a lot of Olympic sports that are being affected by the pandemic. And they are the model that has these NGBs like USA Gymnastics that deals with each of the individual sports bringing athletes to the Olympic level. And so if the NCAA goes under, it's going to be an issue that the Olympic Committee is going to have to be looking at, that there's not going to be that feeder system that's been set up for so long. And kids that are, 14 years old and looking at their future and not having scholarships out there may decide, maybe I should stay with baseball instead of doing gymnastics, because Jake Dalton was in that position at that same age. And at the time, he decided on gymnastics because that's what his real passion was. But if there wasn't a scholarship available for his gymnastics, he might have been off on the track playing baseball now.
My AD asks me this question all the time, or I should say a lot over the last 3 years. Like, what other successful Olympic programs are doing that they do without the collegiate system, like that don't exist in college? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot. I threw out curling, but I have no idea. I think the difference is that they're not going to have to reinvent this infrastructure and this grassroots support system, or really not even grassroots, more like the middle. Because it's like, I would, if I didn't go to Illinois, what would I have done? We hit our peak oftentimes 21, 22, 23. Are you going to, hang out, live in your parents' basement and keep training, hoping for that one national team spot out of 15? Like, you're going to go to baseball. So problem is that this could all come crashing down overnight. Like, you're going to lose 20 kids per program. It's a lot of opportunities vanishing. It's just, that's what I lose sleep overnight.
Yeah, I think we're in a spot now where the evolution of thought is really kind of at a premium, right? And what's going on now, like Justin, you mentioned, 5 guys at Champaign or Chicago Training Center, whatever, those were our guys, and we're sort of in that right now with the situation at Stanford. They can't get in the gym, so half their team's down at Cypress, and we're kind of seeing the future maybe as we live the present right now. And you mentioned GymAct, Justin. I think Scott Barkley and the guys who are in GymAct, they're like all my heroes of the sport, because they're doing things that they have to do. Right? We've here in the college system, we've led a pretty good life. We show up at the meet, the gym's all set up, and the meet's over, and we go home, right? And somebody else tears it all down. Well, Scott's guys, they unload the truck, they set the gym up, they compete, and then they tear it all down and put it back in the truck. I mean, that's to me, that inspires me, because that's a kid and a program and a coach who's dedicated, like probably beyond belief, right? I don't know how many people would enjoy that lifestyle, but Scott's made it work. And that's why he's one of my heroes in the sport, because of that. And, in what's happened over the last year and a half, there's been, 3 or 4 new GymAct programs have showed up. Some by its own creation, some by the fact that they dropped, like Temple dropped, they became a GymAct. UIC dropped their GymAct program. Northern Illinois dropped many years ago. Josh Levin's bringing that back. And, there's a lot of really awesome stories. And might we all be GymAct programs someday? That's a distinct possibility. We're going to fight this thing. And, Mark, you've built an amazing dynasty down there at Oklahoma, and Justin, you're like a campus crusader guy down there at Champaign, and people know you, recognize you, and that's what's important. You got to do your thing on your campus, right? You got to be that special person. You got to build the relationships.
We've talked a lot today about the problems and the history behind the decline of NCAA gymnastics, and I want to switch our focus to the solutions. What can we do moving forward? And one thing that I was repeatedly asked is, how can I help financially? How can I donate? And where does this money go? Is it by buying, t-shirts? Mark, you were promoting t-shirts today. Does some of the money funnel straight to gymnastics? Is there a way to donate strictly to a men's gymnastics budget? Is it kind of a mystery when you donate to the athletic department? Can you walk through how fans can support each of your programs? Justin, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a tough one. We talked a lot with Daniel about a different model, and it's like, but what you can do is kind of what Scott Barkley has done, is you could run a business that successfully offsets your operating budget. Cal's done it. What if we started doing it now before we get cut? But that's where you get a little tricky, is like, how invested is the athletic department going to be with you essentially fundraising for your own program's existence? And then you've got compliance issues with the business model and a separate LLC. It just gets muddy. I don't think they love all those things, even though some clubs have, operate straight out of college programs. Ohio State runs a club right out of their gym. Iowa did too, right?
I think Stanford does as well.
That's what I want to say earlier, is I think they're one of the other reasons Stanford's gym program was saved, is because their gym is a community hotbed. Like, the professors use it. They bring their kids there for classes, and so it really enriches the community by having that program there. And so I really like that model. I think it makes sense. It makes money. I mean, that's where gymnastics is self-sustaining, is at the club model. And you bring in and engage the community. It's not conventional for college, like you look at any women's gym there, it's this elite, ridiculous 20,000 massive square foot event, and it's for girls, and it's like, man, that's crazy. So, like, we could get a lot more use out of this if we started running a club model and the gym pays for itself. Oh, all of a sudden it's paying half your salary too. Oh, and Chuck Chamelka, same thing. He runs a very successful club out of there, and I think outwardly speaks that it offsets his salary. So Nebraska,
and they just got a brand new gym.
They did.
Yeah.
probably because the club's paying for a significant portion of that. So I don't know. I think I don't even. What question are we answering? You know, what?
How can people donate directly to fund your program? Does buying merchandise that says Illinois Gymnastics, does that money?
I think it's not as much as can you get a huge sum of money, like if you have $50, if you have $100. I think quantity matters too, because they are measuring what's your numbers, your overall engagement. So that's kind of been my message to even my recent graduates. If you can throw $100, it shows that relationship is still there. This program is meaningful for you. And the AD looks at cutting a program. He's like, oh my God, they got 10,000 people donating, bringing in $80,000, but 10,000 people are donating this. Like, that's a huge community that supports this program.
And where can people donate to?
Well, I mean, we're running the Stronger Together campaign through the CGA. So there's a link there, or you can donate through our foundation website.
Brett, what about you? How can we get more money to our men's national team and get a better facility for them to be able to train and update some of that equipment?
Yeah, that's it's something that's never really been done before from a USA Gymnastics standpoint as far as soliciting donations. However, there have been individuals recently that have expressed interest in donating to specifically the men's program. And so that sparked a conversation with Lily and leadership staff, and have agreed to actually, if you go to the men's section of the USA Gymnastics website, there is a donate button, right? And you can donate directly to the men's program.
Okay. Mike, what about for Minnesota? What can we do to help your program right now?
Yeah, like Justin said, we started the Stronger Together campaign a week ago, yesterday, I think, and thus far we've raised about a little over $48,000, and I've pushed it pretty hard to the Minnesota people, and probably more than half of that has gone into the Minnesota campaign page. Now, that money's going into the CGA account because we have an option. Like Mark took the option. If you donate to Oklahoma through the Stronger Together campaign, it's going to go directly into his Oklahoma Gymnastics fundraising fund. And every school does it a little bit differently. I didn't want to do that because once the money goes into the foundation, it's their money. Like, that money doesn't come back. So with our situation, saying, hey, we might be dropped at the end of this year, I want to have some control over that money. So if and when maybe we refund it all, if it's in the CGA account, we can do that. If it's in our Minnesota Gymnastics fund, we can't do that. So there's some reason to do it that way from my standpoint. Back in 2007, I started the Stuck Dismount pledge campaign. Get boosters, alumni, donate $1, $2, $3 for every stuck dismount during the year. We average between 120 to 150 sticks every year. So if we can get over $100 per stick, raise 10 grand, 13 grand a year or whatever. And, that fund has gotten up to about $385,000 since 2007. Now it's a little bit at a time, and it's not like the millionaire request that Brett just made. And I would love to have some guys donate $1,000 per stick. That'd be great. We've got a bunch of people doing that. That'd be awesome.
I'm a horse 10 times the donation.
So anyway, we keep track of that. It's one of our statistics we keep track of, and our announcer at our meets is always like, "That's another golden gopher stuck this month." Anybody who's been to Minnesota knows that, right? And so that's one way we did it. And I created a fund, that Stuck This Month fund. Originally, I was going to turn it into an endowed scholarship fund, but then I realized maybe this is more important to keep it liquid, to use for facility enhancement, which was what we were kind of in the process of doing. So like I said, every school is different. I'm sure Mark's situation is different. Justin just mentioned his. I've talked to several schools, and most of them have kind of a general fund for their athletic department. And in a lot of ways, that's probably the best way, because, if we have to fundraise for ourselves and football is fundraising for themselves, they're probably going to raise a lot more money than we will. So we kind of can jump, piggyback onto the efforts of the giant community of Gopher sports donors, right? Because what happens is you keep going back to the same well over and over again. And after a while, the well starts to dry out. And like Brett, dealing with the Cal Cal pledge system, I think I'm still paying my $500 a year for Cal Gymnastics, and I'll continue to do that because I believe in it, and I think it's an important thing. And but that money all goes into Cal Gymnastics, but is Cal Athletics raising more money that gymnastics could benefit from? It's, and every school is different, so you just got to kind of do a little research. And if you want to ask the question, you probably reach out to the coach and ask what's the best way to do it, like you're doing.
Mark, what about for you at Oklahoma? Where can people donate?
Yeah, we have a link to our foundation that's for men's gymnastics, and we've periodically tried to raise money. We've sent guys to the World University Games with that account. I've bought equipment that's not AAI because I've got international athletes that want to be more prepared on the apparatus they're used to using internationally, and so it gives us some flexibility. But we do have a central fundraising group that is our Sooner Club that has professionals that raise big money for the renovations. So we renovated our facility in 2009, and they asked me to help with that campaign with some of the big boosters, but it went to the renovation fund rather than to our operating budget. So being able to contribute to the foundation, you have the ability to do things tax deductibly. And you also then pointed out that we were, trying to sell T-shirts. That money doesn't come back to us directly, but it goes to the athletic department, and it's about engagement. If we have hundreds of people that want to engage with men's gymnastics, it makes it more difficult to make those decisions that it's going to go away, because then people start to say that's a bad PR move. We want to see all sports at Oklahoma, financed to be able to be out there and compete for championships. It's the same with like social media. You want to be on Instagram. You want to get things out there on Twitter. You want to have people involved and engage in your program so that there's an interest, so that when a president kind of looks at things from the financial standpoint, they have to weigh the choices between, being made to look bad because of financial situation, or have to then answer all these people who are supporting your program, like, what are you doing? This is very important to the lives of these young men, the coaches, to the sport. How are you going to answer those questions? So I'm just trying to generate, a certain level of people being involved in the NCAA program so that, we're relevant.
So bouncing off that, one thing I wasn't sure if, Brett, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of the schools that aren't represented here. Mike said it great. You got to reach out to those coaches, those head coaches, because every university is structured differently. Mark and Oklahoma has a very similar model to Stanford. They have a large group that is after an entire school or athletic department endowment to support all sports. Other universities are, every man for themselves or every woman for themselves. If you have the inkling to buy a high bar, for example, for Nebraska, call Chuck Jamelka and say, I want to donate to the program. Maybe I'm afraid of donating to the athletic department because I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I would like to purchase a brand new high bar for the team, and they can make that happen. And that way, those individuals that really want to know exactly where every dollar is spent when they donate to a program, it is possible to do that. I did it all the time at Cal. But like Mark said, if you just want to pick your favorite program, contact the coach. Usually there's a donation button on their athletic website directly to men's gymnastics, for example. Just do it and get out there, even if it's $10.
Thanks so much, Brett. One of the things that I heard each of y'all communicate was the importance of engagement. And so one of the things I wanted to ask about, if CGA had considered, or if any of your NCAA programs had considered, was hiring out Deanna Hong or someone like her to tell the story. Are y'all, each of you, familiar with Deanna Hong and her work?
Yeah, she's great. We'd love to have somebody like that. I actually had a video photographer this past year that I was very happy with some of the things he put together. And we got a lot of people to follow our program just because of it.
Yeah, Deanna really specializes in gymnastics and has been putting out the New Era documentary with UCLA Gymnastics that has generated tons of engagement. She's been hired by the NFL. She's been hired by Pentatonics. I mean, this is someone who's known internationally, been going to world championships for years. And I think it would be worth the investment of CGA, of USA Gymnastics, of this group, this cohort here, to get her to tell this story of men's gymnastics as a dying sport and what can be done to save it, because she is that storyteller who can generate more than really any of us could do by our own social media posts. Is that something that y'all have considered or would consider?
Well, social media is a great revenue spot too. I just had someone reach out from California that owns a social media company, and like, I want to help. I do this for a living. Some accounts are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, a year, just making posts, and because you got tons of followers, and then you garner sponsorships through that. I think it's another outlet to build engagement and actually bring in a lot of money. The problem is that you got to get our department to sign a contract with that person. If they're going to want to do that, they're probably going to not want to do it with men's gymnastics. And so it might be something we'd have to fundraise for ourselves. But there's a very sport specific thing you could donate to.
I think this is another conversation with NBC is a stakeholder in the Olympic Games, in all Olympic sports. And this is a topic that covers, a lot of different opportunities for our next generation, and I think is worthy of coverage, on NBC's platform, in collaboration, hopefully, with the USOPC and USA Gymnastics and the CGA and the women's side and other NGBs that are involved, because it's a story that needs to be told, and it's extremely valuable, and it's our future, it's our legacy.
Yeah, Kensley, I think from the CGA standpoint, we'd be willing to have a conversation with you offline here and talk about Deanna Hong, and she sounds great. Was it Ping Ping who did work at the championships in Kansas City, and I talked to her about maybe coming up and helping out with the Big Ten championships that we were supposed to host in April, but that fell through. And we're hosting the NCAA championships this April. Hopefully we can pull it off and actually have a competition where everybody's there. So that would be another thing I would push is if you can help us push this, and I think we all just have to push it. I want to sell that place out, like have like the grand finale. If that's our last show, I want it to be the greatest show on earth.
One of the questions that came in the most was why are the meets not as accessible? Does it have to do with networks such as Big Ten putting up blockers? But many people have said that I want to watch the meets, but they're not always being streamed. And if they are, they're on people's personal Facebook page, and I'm not always friends with them. So what are ways that we can get more accessibility for streaming of these meets?
I think every place is a little bit different. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and apparently not the right ones who want to watch our meet. So anyway, tell them asked me to become a friend. But if we're having a meet with Illinois at our place, the Big Ten Network owns the rights to that competition, so we can't stream that. We have not all of the meets are on Big Ten Network, but all of the meets are on BTN to go, because at least in our place, we live stream our meets all the time. And if I can get some of our alumni to become the announcers for that particular night, then there's some more engagement and a better produced thing. It's every school has a Student U production, which is a bunch of students on campus that are learning how to become, producers of shows. And so if you can engage with them and get that going, but there's a subscription fee. If somebody wants to watch our meet on Gopher Vision, they got to pay $7.95 a month, for instance, and maybe it's just that one meet they see for the month. But I guess if you're going to go to the meet, you're probably going to pay $8 to get in. So maybe it's a deal. You save a nickel.
We had a contract with Fox Sports, and we also have our own production team in Oklahoma. So they were able to produce our meets last year. We actually only had one, but in the past several years. And then they, basically give it to Fox whenever they have openings. And so did get aired at least regionally, and sometimes it went out to bigger audiences, depending on what time slots were available. So we have a pretty good deal in having that television available to us.
Yeah, Kins, I think your issue is when you go to a school that doesn't have that local production, or someone just doesn't want to pay the monthly subscription fee. Sometimes it's like $30, and you get access to all the sports or whatever. You're like, but I really just wanted to watch this one meet. So then it's a price point that's just too high, or they just don't have the streaming, and so that's when you get the guy who's like, just whip it up on our Facebook page, and it's the Wi-Fi is crappy because maybe you're in a weird off-site location. So usually they're great productions, but sometimes it's just not optioned because it's the rights thing, or the school isn't running a student U production or anything like that.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Michigan, we tried to stream some of our meets and we got in trouble with Big Ten Network because they technically owned the rights to them, but then they weren't covering our meet. And we were like, well,
we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. And this has been a point of topic for the CGA for a long time. Is like, we got to get our product out there. People want to see it. Some people do anyway.
Yeah,
absolutely. So Kensley, you learned the art of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. Is that right? What you're telling us?
We did indeed. As we come to a close here, I want to give each of you the opportunity to talk about one last thing that you think could help save men's gymnastics as NCAA, or getting rid of the NCAA model, going to GymAct, if it's cutting team sizes, going to a Bundesliga format, if it's doing virtual meets where people pay. I want each of you to say one thing that you think really could help that hasn't been discussed today.
$15 million.
Rob a bank. No.
Someone did tell me when we were on GymCastic that the CEO of Google is a big gymnastics fan, or mentioned that. And my boyfriend is a software engineer for Google, so I'm like, I'm gonna see if we can
knock on his door. Hey,
knock on his door.
I have an alumni that works at SpaceX. I'm like, I have a favor to ask of you. You should talk to your boss and ask him for $15 million.
I know you're busy with rockets, but
yeah, I know you're busy trying to save the world. I don't know. For me, that's hard to say in one thing, right? Like engagement, right? At this point, like aside from throwing a sizable, amount of money at it, I'm really looking at, how do we? I mean, we don't know if we're going to compete this year. It is a really weird time to ask this. We've lost 3 programs. I think we got to save the 3 we lost. I think that's grabbed the attention of a lot of our athletic directors, as they're looking at 12 left, only 4 in the Big Ten, like that. They're looking at how many, and I love supporting you, but is there enough to really validate supporting you anymore? And I know that from personal experience. That's a thought crossing their mind. So we can't let these go. Find anything and everything you can do to do what Mike says. Mike?
Well, I would say for our particular situation, the Board of Regents still has to approve this proposal to drop these 4 sports. So as of right now, that has not happened. That meeting is going to be October 8th and 9th. So really, it's in the hands of the regents. So what have I been doing? I've been talking to regents, and we've had some good conversations, and I think that's an area that we need people to help out with. So I've posted stuff on my social media pages about writing letters to the regents, and I think they've gotten way more letters than they anticipated, and they're actually reading them, and I think that's really good. The second thing is we have a petition, to save men's gymnastics. I posted that on my social media stuff. So signing that, I think we're just about ready to go, like 10,000 signatures sometime tonight. Maybe we're at 8,800 last time I looked, about an hour and a half ago, and it's been moving, about 1,000 every 5 hours. So it's been good. And then, donating to the Stronger Together campaign, I think is a really good thing. And the original intent was is the money comes into the CGA. The CGA will push 95% of that back to the program, keep 5% of it to deal with the stripe fees and the different donor box fees that we have, and start to build an emergency fund and a fund that would create, some money to help with growth initiatives. And growth initiatives in NCAA gymnastics is a pretty tough nut to crack, but growth initiatives in the GymAct program, there's about 5 or 6 GymAC programs that are kind of ready to be launched. Okay, so that thing is growing. They all need some seed money. So the hope was that we could raise some money for each program and then keep a little bit of it in the bank and use that as some funding mechanisms for some of the new GymAC programs. So from my standpoint, that would be where I'd need people to help out, talking to the regents through a letter, signing a petition, making a donation.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have any answers, but I just know that I really think it's worth saving. There's just too many good stories of athletes that come out of our programs and go on and have success in life. And, recently I had a kid come to me who came on an ROTC scholarship, and he was terrible. And he knew he was terrible, but he loved gymnastics, and for a couple of years he worked in our club program, and he'd always try to grab my attention and crack a joke and engage me with something. And eventually he got a little better. And I sort of like, I love this kid, and I put him on a roster, even though he still was not very good. And in time, he ended up competing on a national championship team on rings for us. And now he's in the military. He's an officer, and he keeps in touch with me. I hear from him every couple of weeks, and he keeps in touch with my guys. He just loved the sport. And now he's defending our country, and he's doing amazing things. And we've got those kind of stories where guys that have gone to be doctors and lawyers and teachers and coaches. I mean, I can't imagine a future without what we do, because it is such a great thing. We have athletes that are very good academically, good character, that bring a lot of positives to the universities that they represent. So I just don't understand how that's not a valuable product.
Mark, you just jogged my mind of actually something I did want to say, and it kind of ties in with what Brett said earlier about making this a bigger thing, getting NBC attached. Letters showing up in email boxes is one thing, but national news coverage on the direction of men's Olympic sports and really just Olympic sports in general. I mean, there's women's sports being cut here as well. I think that there's a story to tell here. And I think that pressure on an athletic department at a national scale of kind of like delving into that is, for better, just to be honest, is exactly what they don't want. That's exactly what they don't want to happen. You get national news media affiliates kind of delving into this story, and you got Mark or Mike sharing a similar story about the opportunities, and we've been here for this, and our budget is only this, and like we just want to be able to continue to operate. That's a different level of pressure, and I think that has some substantial influence on the minds of the decision makers.
Yeah, I think Mark hit the nail on the head with that story. And like you said, there's lots of stories like that, and those stories drive emotions, right? And emotions drive actions. And if I'm a member of the Board of Regents, I'm just voting on an agenda item that somebody said we should do this, and it's like, okay, rubber stamp it. They need to have those conversations with the kids, with the coaches, with the emotional impact it's going to have, because this has created such an opportunity for me beyond belief. But now my life has changed drastically for the worse, And I think those emotional heartstring tugs really are important for driving this thing, because again, the emotions drive the actions, I think.
Not every son is going to be 6'4" and 300 pounds, like some are going to be 5'1", $140, like what's he going to do? He's not going to get the college opportunity at the way that this whole system is going. I just think that's a sad thing. I think there's a story there.
Don't be sad, Justin. Don't be sad.
I'm rarely sad, Mike. You know it.
No, Mark said it great. It's worth saving. This is absolutely worth saving. What I think that our supporters can do first, Justin said it, Iowa, William and Mary, Minnesota. Let's focus our efforts on those athletic directors, the Board of Regents, and continue to make our voices heard and share your college experience, whether it's just being a spectator or being on a team, and how it impacted your life. to attach that story, because it's a real deal. And then after you've accomplished that goal, reach out to your favorite, university that you wish to support, and try to build a relationship with the athletic director. I know it's hard. I've been trying to pound down doors from all athletic directors, and they're hard to get to during this time and this pandemic, obvious reasons. But keep trying to get the ear of the athletic director. They're the ones making these decisions. And if your voices are heard and, the community rallies around all the existing programs right now, who knows, perhaps we can convince another athletic director to take on another program, right? And reinstate something and restart the growth process, because it does matter and it is worth saving.
I'll let Kenzie go first. I don't mess anything else up. Kenzie, got anything else to add before we part ways, or no?
No, I think that was a great place to end.
Yep. I was just going to wrap things full circle. It's ironic that this happened. I went to Springfield College Division III program and barely got onto that team. But the only reason I have a company, this podcast exists, that I've been able to do work with physical therapy and stuff that I think's, making a positive difference, is because of college gymnastics. There's no other way that I would have gotten through it. And it wasn't even a scholarship. It was just my friends and people who took care of me. So I think the emotional stories that come out of these things is probably the most important. We got to try to highlight, because I think that's I think Mike might have said, that's what actually moves people into action. So yes, that is all I have. But I greatly appreciate everyone's time. I know it's late for some of us and we all have busy lives, but I think it's going to be very important for people to hear the real issues and hopefully try to drum up some attention, some money, some efforts to try to save the sport. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Dave,
Thanks.
Kensley, thank you guys for coordinating this and giving us a platform to have a roundtable discussion. And I hope this gets out to the community sooner rather than later, just to keep the discussion open, because it is a timely topic, and we're in the fight right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. My contributions, I'll stay up really late tomorrow night editing it so it can go out maybe this week. That'll be my help.
I'm not sure anything needs to be edited out. I don't know.
Just my mess ups. Nah, we're good. All right.
You can take out the part when I was eating my dinner tacos.
That's the thumbnail. Yeah, that's the start.
Don't please.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.